The pen felt unusually heavy in my hand. It was a Mont Blanc, a gift I had given Robert for our 25th anniversary. Now 15 years later, he had slid it across the cold expanse of our Calicotta marble kitchen island for me to sign away my life. "It's the only way, Ellie," Robert said. His voice was a masterclass in manufactured despair. He ran a hand through his silvering hair, a gesture he knew always made me soften. "The creditors are circling. If we don't do this, if we don't sever our assets right now, they'll take everything from both of us. The house, the cars, your retirement fund. The FBI is looking into the company's debts. I can't let you go down with the ship. I won't let you." I looked up at him, my husband of 40 years, the man I had built a life with, the man whose dreams I had nurtured since we were living in a cramped studio apartment, eating generic mac and cheese. His eyes, usually so sharp and commanding, were now wide with what I believed was genuine terror. He looked exhausted. The lines around his mouth seemed deeper, the shadows under his eyes darker. Standing a few feet behind him, silent and perfectly poised, was Jessica Sterling. She was the new general counsel for Vance Innovations. 34 years old, with an immaculate ivory silk blouse, a razor-sharp bob, and a scent of expensive, heavy gardenia perfume that always seemed to linger in my house long after she left business dinners with Robert. She held a sleek leather portfolio, her expression a mask of professional sympathy. "Mrs. Vance," Jessica had said earlier, her voice smooth and entirely devoid of warmth. "By signing this dissolution of assets, you are legally distancing yourself from Vance Innovations and Robert's personal liabilities. The small stipend Robert has arranged is, frankly, a miracle given the impending bankruptcy. It protects you." Protect me? That was the phrase they kept using. Over and over, a steady drumbeat meant to drown out my own common sense. I didn't care about the money. I had never cared about the money. When my father, Thomas Hayes, first tinkered with the microvalves in our dusty garage 3 decades ago, it wasn't for wealth. My father was a quiet, brilliant man with grease permanently etched into the lines of his palms. He invented the core technology that Vance Innovations was built upon. But my father wasn't a businessman. He was an architect of ideas. It was Robert who had the charm, the ambition, the relentless drive to take my father's quiet genius and turn it into a corporate empire. When my father passed away, the company was just beginning to take off. I spent the next 30 years managing the home, raising our son, Connor, hosting the endless parade of investors and board members, making sure Robert's world was a seamless, frictionless environment so he could conquer his. I was the silent foundation of his towering success, and now that tower was supposedly crumbling into dust. "Where will I go, Robert?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. The grand kitchen, with its custom cabinetry and sweeping views of the manicured gardens I had designed myself, suddenly felt like a museum I was being locked out of. "I've arranged a modest apartment downtown," Robert said quickly, his eyes darting to the signed papers as if afraid the ink might vanish. "It's paid for the next 6 months. It's not what you're used to, Ellie, I know. But once the dust settles, once I navigate this bankruptcy and clear my name, I'll find you, I promise. This is just tactical. A tactical divorce." It sounded absurd, but the panic in his voice was so convincing. I believed him. Why wouldn't I? You don't spend 40 years sleeping beside a man, nursing him through pneumonia, burying parents together, and raising a child, only to assume he is looking you in the eye and lying with the breath you helped put in his lungs. I signed the papers. The scratch of the Mont Blanc against the thick legal parchment echoed in the quiet kitchen. Jessica stepped forward instantly, sliding the documents into her portfolio with a swift, practiced motion. I caught a fleeting glimpse of her eyes as she looked at Robert. It was a look I couldn't quite decipher at the time, a spark of something that looked dangerously like triumph. Within 48 hours, my life as Eleanor Vance, the respected matriarch of the Vance family, was erased. I packed a single large suitcase. I left behind the custom-tailored dresses, the heirloom jewelry locked in the safe, the thousands of books in the library I had curated. I packed only the essentials: comfortable clothes, a few framed photographs of Connor when he was a little boy, and a small, battered wooden box my father had given me shortly before he died. The apartment Robert had arranged was a revelation in humiliation. It was a 4th-floor walk-up in a decaying brick building on the edge of the city. The radiator clanked aggressively throughout the night, coughing up dry, metallic heat, while the single window in the living room rattled against the autumn wind. The walls were paper-thin, carrying the sounds of arguing neighbors and wailing sirens. At 62, my joints ached from hauling my suitcase up those narrow, dimly lit stairs. I sat on the edge of the lumpy mattress that first night, wrapped in a thin cardigan, staring at the peeling wallpaper. The silence of the apartment was deafening. I was entirely alone. The meager stipend Jessica had spoken of barely covered the utilities and basic groceries. The miracle money was a starvation diet. Within 2 weeks, I realized that if I didn't find a way to supplement it, I wouldn't be able to afford my blood pressure medication by the end of the month. I, who had once written checks for tens of thousands of dollars to charity galas without blinking, found myself standing in the back of a neighborhood bakery, tying a flour-dusted apron around my waist. The owner, an exhausted woman named Maria, hired me off the books to knead dough and manage the oven starting at 4 in the morning. The physical labor was brutal. My hands, once manicured and soft, became calloused and frequently burned by the hot baking sheets. My feet swelled by the end of my 10-hour shifts, but the physical pain was nothing compared to the emotional strangulation of isolation. My only lifeline was supposed to be my son, Connor. He was 32, the chief operating officer of Vance Innovations. He was Robert's golden boy, molded in his father's image. I tried to call him during my breaks at the bakery, huddled in the alleyway against the freezing wind, smelling of yeast and burnt sugar. Usually it went straight to voicemail. "Hey, Mom!" His voice would finally drift through the phone days later, always sounding rushed, always with the background noise of a busy street or a restaurant. "Connor, honey," I would say, trying to keep the desperation out of my voice. "I haven't heard from you. How are you? How is your father holding up with the bankruptcy? Is the FBI still? Mom, I can't talk about the company stuff." He'd cut in, his tone clipped and professional. "Legal advised us to keep a strict firewall. It's a mess right now. Dad is drowning in paperwork. I miss you, Connor. Could we get a coffee? Just for 20 minutes? I'm working at a bakery on 5th now. It's not far from your—" "I'm swamped, Mom. Truly, we're trying to salvage what we can. I'll call you next week, okay? Love you. Gotta go." Click. The dial tone was a physical blow to the chest. He was my son. I had stayed up countless nights rubbing his back when he had asthma attacks as a child. I had driven him to every soccer game, proofread every college essay, and now he was treating me like an annoying vendor trying to pitch him a bad deal. The weeks bled into a brutal, gray winter. I convinced myself that Connor was simply trying to survive the corporate fallout alongside his father. I convinced myself that Robert's silence was a noble attempt to protect me from the legal crossfire. I held on to the fragile narrative that my sacrifice was saving my family. It was the only way I could get out of bed in the morning. Until a rainy Tuesday evening in late November. It was my day off from the bakery. The apartment was freezing because the building's boiler had given out again. I wrapped a scarf around my neck and walked 3 blocks through the freezing drizzle to a small, brightly lit coffee shop. It was a modest luxury, a $3 cup of black coffee just to sit in a heated room for an hour. I found a small table in the corner, peeling off my damp coat. Someone had left a newspaper and a few magazines scattered on the chair opposite mine. I pushed them aside, wrapping my cold hands around the paper cup to siphon its heat. As I sipped the bitter coffee, my eyes drifted to the magazine at the top of the pile. It was the latest issue of a prominent national business publication. The glossy cover caught the fluorescent light overhead. My breath caught in my throat. The air in my lungs suddenly turned to ice. There on the cover, in vibrant high-definition color, was Robert. He didn't look exhausted. He didn't look like a man drowning in debt or terrified of federal investigators. He looked like a king. He was wearing a bespoke charcoal suit that I recognized, a $5,000 piece from Savile Row. He was smiling a broad, triumphant smile, holding a glass of champagne. But it was the headline that made the coffee shop spin around me. The billion-dollar pivot, how CEO Robert Vance engineered record profits and prepared Vance Innovations for a massive acquisition. Record profits, massive acquisition. My hands began to tremble so violently that coffee sloshed over the rim of my cup, burning my knuckles. I ignored the pain. I grabbed the magazine, my eyes frantically scanning the smaller text beneath the headline. After a year of aggressive restructuring and shedding dead weight, Vance Innovations has emerged leaner and more profitable than ever. Sources confirm the tech giant is in the final stages of a buyout by a major conglomerate, a deal expected to net the Vance leadership hundreds of millions. Shedding dead weight, I stared at the words until they blurred. There was no bankruptcy. There were no creditors circling. The FBI wasn't at the door. It was all a lie. A calculated, elaborate, theatrical lie designed for one singular purpose: to get me to sign that piece of paper. To get me to walk away from 40 years of shared assets, shared history, and the company my own father's genius had built. He had terrified me into poverty so he wouldn't have to split his impending fortune. A cold, creeping numbness started at the tips of my fingers and slowly moved toward my heart. But the ultimate betrayal was yet to come. My eyes moved from Robert's smiling face to the background of the cover photo. Standing just over his shoulder, her hand resting intimately on his arm, was Jessica Sterling. She was wearing a stunning, backless emerald gown, but it wasn't the dress that caught my attention. It was her left hand, draped elegantly over Robert's forearm, proudly displaying a diamond ring so large it caught the camera's flash, blindingly bright. She wasn't just his general counsel. She was his future. I had been discarded, erased, tossed into a freezing rat-trap apartment to bake bread at dawn while they toasted to their millions and their new life. And they had used my love, my trust, and my absolute devotion to Robert as the very weapon to destroy me. I didn't cry. I thought I would, but the tears didn't come. The woman who would have cried, the gentle, accommodating Ellie Vance who always put her family first, died in that coffee shop. I closed the magazine. The trembling in my hands stopped entirely. I felt a sudden, profound stillness settle over me. It was the terrifying calm that descends right before a hurricane makes landfall. I stood up, leaving the spilled coffee on the table. I walked out into the freezing rain, feeling the icy drops hit my face, but I didn't pull my collar up. I needed the cold. I needed it to freeze every last drop of sentimentality left in my veins. Arthur thought he had outsmarted a naive housewife. He thought he had severed the dead weight. But as I walked back to my miserable apartment, a single thought crystallized in my mind with lethal clarity. He might have the title, the suits, and the cunning lawyer on his arm. But the foundation of that company, the very patents that made it worth hundreds of millions, were created in a dusty garage by Thomas Hayes. When I returned to my apartment, I didn't turn on the lights. I walked straight to my closet, pulled down the single suitcase I had brought from my old life, and unzipped the front pocket. I reached deep inside and pulled out the small, battered wooden box my father had given me. I sat on the floor in the dark, running my thumbs over the rough wood. "I built something, Ellie," my father had told me on his deathbed, his breathing shallow, his voice a dry rasp. "Robert is a smart boy, but his eyes are always on the horizon. He never looks at the ground he's standing on. I made sure the ground belongs to you. Do you understand? Use this only when you have absolutely no one left to trust." I hadn't understood then. I had put the box away, secure in my marriage, secure in my life. I flipped the small brass latch and opened the lid. Inside, resting on a bed of faded velvet, was a single heavy brass key with a number stamped on it, and a business card. The card was yellowed with age. It bore the name of a law firm in the financial district and the name, Harrison Cole, managing partner. I looked at the key. The shadows of the room seemed to stretch and contort around me. The betrayal I had suffered was vast, an ocean of deceit that had swallowed my life whole. But as I held my father's key, I realized I wasn't drowning anymore. I was just learning how to swim in the dark. Robert Vance wanted to play a game of ruthless corporate chess. He thought he had already checkmated me. What he didn't realize was that I hadn't even sat down at the board yet, and when I did, I wouldn't be playing for a settlement. I was going to take it all. The next morning, I didn't go to the bakery. I called Maria, my voice steady, and told her I wouldn't be coming in. I didn't offer an excuse, and for the first time in months, I didn't apologize. I hung up the phone, walked to the tiny, cracked mirror above my bathroom sink, and looked at myself. My hair, once professionally maintained in a soft blonde sweep, had grown out, revealing stark silver roots. My skin was pale from exhaustion. My hands bore the angry red marks of oven burns. I looked every bit the discarded, worn-out woman Robert had designed me to be. I took a washcloth, scrubbed my face in the freezing water, and dressed in the only decent piece of clothing I had left. a tailored black wool coat I had brought from the house, practically a relic from a past life. The address on the yellowed business card belonged to a building in the heart of the financial district. It was a towering monolith of steel and dark glass that seemed to scrape the low-hanging winter clouds. I walked through the revolving doors, instantly hit by the blast of heated air and the scent of expensive leather, floor wax, and power. Men and women in sharp suits rushed past me, their eyes locked on their phones, entirely blind to the 62-year-old woman in the lobby. To them, I was invisible, a ghost haunting the halls of commerce. I approached the directory, Cole & Associates, 42nd floor. The elevator ride was silent, my stomach dropping with each illuminated number. When the silver doors parted, I stepped into a reception area paneled in rich mahogany. It felt hushed, like a library or a church. The receptionist, a young woman with a flawless blowout, barely glanced up from her monitor. "May I help you?" she asked, her tone dripping with practiced polite dismissal. I reached into my pocket, my fingers closing around the cold brass key. I pulled out the yellowed business card and placed it softly on the immaculate granite desk. "I am here to see Harrison Cole," I said. My voice didn't shake. The receptionist glanced at the card, then frowned. "Mr. Cole is the senior managing partner. He doesn't take walk-in appointments. If you'd like to speak with one of our junior associates about a consultation..." "Tell him Thomas Hayes' daughter is here," I interrupted, my tone dropping a fraction of an octave. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't have to. "And tell him I brought the key." She blinked, taken aback by the sudden shift in the air, and picked up her phone. She spoke in hushed tones, her eyes darting back to me. A moment later, the heavy oak doors behind her swung open. Harrison Cole was a man who looked like he had been carved from the same mahogany as his office. He was in his late 70s, with a shock of white hair, piercing blue eyes, and a posture so straight it commanded immediate respect. He wore a three-piece suit with a pocket square. He stopped in the doorway, his eyes locking onto my face. For a long, agonizing moment, he just stared. And then, the severe lines of his face softened into an expression of profound, weary relief. "Eleanor," he breathed, his voice thick with gravel and age. "My God, you finally came." He ushered me into a massive corner office overlooking the sprawling city below. He didn't ask me if I wanted coffee. He didn't offer empty pleasantries. He walked straight to a heavy iron safe behind his desk, dialed a complex combination, and pulled out a thick, leather-bound folio. He placed it in the center of the vast conference table and gestured for me to sit. "I was beginning to think I would die before you walked through those doors," Harrison said, taking the seat across from me. He folded his hands. "Your father and I were very close, Eleanor. He was a genius, but more importantly, he was a man who understood human nature better than anyone I have ever met in this business." I pulled the brass key from my coat pocket and placed it on the table. It landed with a heavy, final clink. "He told me to use this only when I had no one left to trust. I thought he was just being a paranoid old man." Harrison let out a dry, bitter chuckle. Thomas was many things, but paranoid was not one of them. He was observant. He watched Robert. He watched how Robert looked at money, how he looked at power, and unfortunately, how he looked at you. Thomas knew that Robert's ambition would eventually eclipse his morality. It was only a matter of time. I swallowed the lump forming in my throat. "Robert divorced me, Harrison. He told me the company was going bankrupt. He terrified me into signing a complete dissolution of assets to protect me from the FBI. I live in a freezing walk-up. I bake bread at 4 in the morning to pay for my groceries." I paused, the anger flaring hot and bright in my chest. "And yesterday I saw him on the cover of a magazine. He's selling the company for hundreds of millions, with his new lawyer on his arm." Harrison didn't look surprised. He didn't gasp or offer pity. He simply reached out and placed his hand over the leather folio. "Robert Vance is a fool," Harrison said quietly. "A brilliant, charismatic, absolute fool. He believes he built the empire. He believes he is the king of the castle. But he forgot one very crucial detail, Eleanor." Harrison opened the folio. Inside were stacks of legal documents, aged and stamped with seals I didn't recognize. He pulled out a single sheet of heavy parchment and turned it toward me. 30 years ago, when Vance Innovations was just a promising startup preparing to incorporate, your father filed the foundational patents. The technology that makes the company valuable, the microvalves, the proprietary algorithms. That is all Thomas's intellectual property. When the company went public, your father refused to take a board seat. He hated the spotlight. Robert happily took the title of CEO, the corner office, the magazine covers. I know all this, I whispered. But you don't know the structure of the equity, Harrison corrected gently. Thomas transferred his patents to the company in exchange for shares. But not just any shares. He established a blind trust, the Hayes Trust. It is registered under a corporate proxy on Wall Street to maintain complete anonymity. Robert believes that Proxy is a syndicate of aggressive New York investors. He has spent 30 years trying to appease them, reporting to them, fearing them. Harrison leaned forward, his blue eyes locking onto mine with an intensity that made my breath hitch. The Hayes Trust holds 51% of the preferred voting shares of Vance Innovations. Not common stock, Eleanor. Preferred voting shares. I stared at the document, the dense legal jargon blurring together. I don't understand what that means, Harrison. I'm not a businesswoman. I'm a housewife. You were a housewife, he corrected sharply. Today you need to be something else. Let me explain it in the simplest terms. Common stock means you own a piece of the pie. Preferred voting shares mean you own the bakery, the oven, and the recipe. Robert Vance is the CEO. He runs the day-to-day, but he operates entirely at the pleasure of the majority shareholder. My heart began to hammer against my ribs. A slow, terrifying realization was beginning to dawn on me, creeping up the back of my neck like a physical chill. The Hayes Trust has absolute veto power over any major corporate action, Harrison continued, his voice dropping to a surgical whisper. The appointment of the CEO, the issuance of new stock, and most importantly, the sale or acquisition of the company. He tapped a manicured finger against the parchment. Your father named one sole, irrevocable beneficiary to the Hayes Trust. You, Eleanor. The trust activates the moment you present that key, which means, as of this exact second, Harrison paused, letting the silence fill the cavernous office. Robert Vance does not own the company he is trying to sell. He works for you, and he cannot sell a single paperclip of Vance Innovations to that conglomerate without your explicit, legally binding signature. The silence in the room became absolute. The city outside the window, the traffic, the millions of people rushing through their lives, all of it faded away. There was only the sound of my own erratic heartbeat, drumming against my eardrums. He works for me. The man who had thrown me away like a worn-out shoe. The man who had manipulated my love to steal my future. The man who was currently parading his 34-year-old mistress around Manhattan, drinking champagne on the precipice of becoming a billionaire. All of it, the suits, the cars, the glass tower, the very air he breathed in his executive suite, existed on land that I owned. I looked down at my hands. They were still calloused. The burn marks from the ovens were still red and angry, but they no longer looked like the hands of a victim. They looked like the hands of a woman who had survived the fire and was now ready to control it. I didn't cry. I didn't laugh. I felt a cold, immaculate clarity wash over my brain, sweeping away the fog of grief and betrayal that had paralyzed me for months. It was a terrifying, beautiful awakening. He thinks he won, I whispered, the words tasting like copper in my mouth. He thinks I'm rotting in that apartment, too stupid and too scared to fight back. He relies on your silence, Eleanor, Harrison agreed. He relies on the fact that you have always been the peacemaker. He assumes you will fade away into the background because that is what society expects women of your age and disposition to do. They expect you to be graceful in your defeat. I looked up at Harrison, my eyes narrowing. What do we do? Do we sue him? Do we call the police for the fraud? Harrison sat back, steepling his fingers. If you want to walk into his office today with these papers, you can. You can fire him. You can humiliate him in front of his precious new lawyer. You can take the company and the millions. It is entirely within your right. I thought about it. I imagined the look of shock on Robert's handsome, arrogant face. I imagined Jessica Sterling's smug smile shattering into a million pieces. It was a seductive thought. It would be quick. It would be explosive. And it would be entirely unsatisfying. If I walked in there now, he would spin it. He would use his PR machine to paint me as the vindictive, crazy ex-wife who stumbled into a fortune on a technicality. He would find a way to wriggle out of the legal repercussions of the fake bankruptcy. He would survive. "No," I said, my voice surprising me with its steely resonance. "No, we don't do it today." Harrison raised an eyebrow, a flicker of profound respect crossing his weathered features. "Oh? If you shoot a king in the foot, he still wears the crown," I said, reciting a proverb my father used to mutter when he was fixing intricate machinery. Robert spent a year building a trap for me, a year of lying, of looking me in the eye over dinner while he plotted my execution. I am not going to grant him the mercy of a quick death. I stood up and walked to the floor-to-ceiling windows, looking down at the crawling yellow taxis and the ants in business suits below. "He is trying to sell the company," I continued, my mind racing, connecting dots I didn't even know I had the capacity to see. "He is trying to close the biggest deal of his life. He has likely leveraged everything he has to make it happen. He and Jessica are flying high." I turned back to Harrison, the ghost of a smile touching the corners of my mouth. A smile that held absolutely no warmth. "Let him build the house of cards higher, Harrison. Let him get right to the very edge of the cliff. Let him taste the champagne. I want him to believe he has won everything. And when he reaches for the pen to sign the deal of a lifetime, I am going to be the one sitting across the table." Harrison Cole smiled. It was the smile of a predator recognizing another of its kind. "You are your father's daughter, Eleanor. What do you need from me?" "I need an education," I said simply. "I don't know the first thing about mergers and acquisitions, SEC filings, or corporate leverage. Robert thinks I'm an ignorant housewife. If I am going to destroy him, I cannot do it with just a piece of paper. I have to do it with my mind. I need to understand his world better than he does." "It will be exhausting," Harrison warned. "We will have to operate in complete secrecy. If Robert gets even a whiff that the Hayes Trust is active, or that you are connected to it, he will use every dirty trick Jessica Sterling can invent to tie you up in litigation for the next decade." "I used to stay awake for 3 days straight when Connor had the croup," I replied coldly. "I can handle exhaustion." And so, the double life began. To the rest of the world, I remained Ellie Vance, the tragic, discarded older woman. I kept my freezing apartment. I continued to work at the bakery. I let the burn marks on my arms heal into tough white scars. I let Connor ignore my occasional strategically pathetic voicemails. I maintained the illusion of my total defeat. But every evening, when I returned to my cramped apartment smelling of stale bread, I didn't collapse into bed. I locked the door, drew the cheap curtains, and opened my laptop. Harrison sent couriers to my apartment twice a week, dropping off heavily encrypted drives and boxes of printed ledgers disguised as baking supplies. My rickety kitchen table became a war room. I spent the brutal winter months devouring information. I learned how to read balance sheets, P&L statements, and cash flow projections. I studied the agonizingly dense legal language of corporate acquisitions. I traced the money Robert had hidden. With Harrison's investigators, we found the offshore accounts Jessica had set up to funnel the missing company funds that had supposedly caused the bankruptcy. We found the fake invoices. We found the paper trail of their deceit, meticulously documented by a woman who thought she was untouchable. At first, the numbers and legal jargon were a foreign language. There were nights I cried out of sheer frustration, staring at spreadsheets until my eyes bled, feeling exactly as stupid as Robert always subtly implied I was. But slowly, the fog lifted. The numbers stopped being math and started becoming a story. I saw the greed. I saw the reckless leverage Robert was employing to pump up the company's valuation before the sale. I saw the pressure he was under. The woman who used to worry about the perfect centerpiece for a charity dinner was dead. In her place, a strategic queen was being forged in the fire of absolute betrayal. I was 62 years old, and for the first time in my life, I wasn't an accessory to a man's ambition. I was the architect of my own retribution. Spring finally broke through the gray chill of the city. The ice melted and the trees in Central Park began to bud. And according to the intercepted emails Harrison provided, Robert's massive acquisition deal with Global Apex Conglomerate was exactly 3 weeks away from closing. It was time to make my first move on the board. It was time for the Hayes Trust to come out of the shadows and make Robert Vance bleed. The spring sun in New York is usually a reason for optimism, a bright promise that the bitter cold is finally over. But as April arrived, The sunlight streaming through the blinds of Harrison Cole's office only served to illuminate the dust motes dancing in the air, highlighting the meticulous surgical dismantling of Robert Vance's life that we had planned on this very mahogany table. 3 weeks until Robert's crown jewel, Vance Innovations, was set to be acquired by Global Apex. 3 weeks until he and Jessica Sterling believed they would cash out for hundreds of millions of dollars and sail into the sunset. It was time to tighten the noose. "The Hayes Trust has been a silent partner for 30 years, Eleanor," Harrison said, adjusting his reading glasses as he reviewed the legal draft we had spent the weekend perfecting. "Robert expects that silence to continue. He assumes the proxy management firm on Wall Street will simply rubber stamp the acquisition, collect their dividend, and let him take the glory." "Then let's give him a very loud wake-up call," I replied. I was wearing a tailored navy blazer I had purchased from a thrift store and meticulously altered myself. It wasn't Savile Row, but it fit like armor. That afternoon, Harrison dispatched a formal, heavily legally worded letter from the proxy management firm representing the Hayes Trust directly to the board of directors at Vance Innovations, bypassing Robert's executive office entirely. The letter was a masterpiece of corporate intimidation. It stated that the majority shareholder was gravely concerned about the current leadership structure and the aggressive, potentially unstable leveraging utilized to inflate the company's valuation prior to the Global Apex merger. We didn't kill the deal. Not yet. Instead, we demanded immediate, crippling concessions for our approval. We demanded a full external audit of all offshore accounts connected to the legal department. We demanded that executive bonuses tied to the acquisition be frozen indefinitely. And most surgically, we demanded that the general counsel, Jessica Sterling, be recused from all further negotiations due to unspecified conflicts of interest. "You are shaking the cage, Eleanor," Harrison had warned with a rare predatory grin. "I don't want to just shake the cage," I had answered. "I want them to realize they are locked inside it." The fallout was instantaneous. Through Harrison's network of discreet corporate contacts, we watched the panic unfold. Robert, who had spent the last year projecting an aura of untouchable success, suddenly found himself cornered by his own board of directors. The board was terrified of angering the mysterious Hayes Trust, the unseen giant that could tank the entire multi-million-dollar deal with a single veto. According to the whispers in the financial district, the executive floor of Vance Innovations became a war zone. Robert was screaming at his aides. Jessica, stripped of her authority in the negotiations and facing an audit of the very accounts she had used to hide my stolen money, was reportedly livid. The perfect, polished facade of the ultimate power couple was beginning to fracture under the immense pressure of their own greed. They were turning on each other. It was exactly what I wanted. But war is never fought without casualties, and the deepest wound I would suffer didn't come from Robert or his mistress. It came from my own flesh and blood. It happened late on a Thursday night. I was sitting at my rickety kitchen table in the walk-up apartment, the radiator hissing a weak rhythm. I was reviewing a newly decrypted batch of internal financial transfers from the time of my divorce, the fake bankruptcy files. These were the documents that proved the company's debts were fabricated to force me into signing the dissolution of assets. I was tracing the flow of money, tracking how millions had been temporarily shifted into shell companies to make Vance Innovations look insolvent on paper. And then I saw it. At the bottom of the most damning transfer authorization, a document illegally shifting $50 million off the books just 2 days before Robert handed me the divorce papers, were 3 signatures. The first was Robert's. The second was Jessica's, signing off on the legal compliance of the blatant fraud. The third signature, authorizing the operational release of the funds, belonged to the chief operating officer, Connor Vance. I stopped breathing. The numbers on the screen blurred. The hum of the refrigerator in the corner of the tiny kitchen suddenly sounded like a roaring jet engine. I touched the screen, my trembling fingertips tracing the familiar loop of the C and the sharp, aggressive slant of the V. It was a signature I had helped him practice when he was 10 years old, sitting at the dining room table, dreaming of being a big, important man like his father. My son, my only child. He hadn't just been busy. He hadn't just been protecting himself from his father's legal fallout. He had been a fully complicit architect of my ruin. He knew the bankruptcy was a lie. He knew I was being thrown out of my home of 40 years with nothing but a suitcase and a pittance. He had signed the paper that financed my starvation, all so he could secure his place at his father's side. For the first hour, I couldn't move. I sat in the dim light of the laptop, the betrayal acting as a physical paralyzing agent. I felt a primal, agonizing scream building in the back of my throat, the kind of grief that only a mother who has been slaughtered by her own child can understand. I wanted to call him. I wanted to scream into the phone, to ask him how he could sleep at night knowing his mother was waking up at 4 a.m. to scrub baking sheets just to afford her blood pressure medication. But I didn't reach for the phone. I closed my eyes. I pictured Robert's arrogant smile on the magazine cover. I pictured Jessica's diamond ring. And then I pictured Connor, standing in his expensive corner office, ignoring my calls, calculating the exact price of his mother's survival. When I opened my eyes, the tears were gone. The paralyzing grief had burned away, leaving behind something terrifyingly pure. Cold, absolute resolve. If you want to play with the wolves, Connor, I thought, staring at his signature, then you have to learn how it feels to be eaten. I didn't call him. Instead, I dug deeper into the files Harrison had provided regarding the Global Apex acquisition. Robert had promised Connor the CEO chair once the deal closed, and Robert ascended to the holding company's board. It was the carrot Robert had dangled to buy his son's absolute loyalty in moral bankruptcy. It took me 3 hours of digging through the encrypted side letters of the merger agreement to find what I was looking for. It was a confidential addendum negotiated directly between Robert, Jessica, and the Global Apex executives. Section 4, Clause B, Post-Acquisition Restructuring. Upon completion of the merger, the position of Chief Operating Officer at Vance Innovations would be rendered redundant. The current COO would be offered a nominal severance package and phased out within 30 days to make room for Global Apex's own executive team. Robert and Jessica had never intended to give Connor the throne. They were using him to do the dirty work, to sign the fraudulent papers that tied him to the crime, and the moment the check cleared, they were going to throw him out into the cold. Just like they did to me. I printed the addendum. I took a red pen and circled Section 4, Clause B. I didn't write a note. I didn't sign my name. I slid the paper into a thick, unmarked manila envelope. The next morning, I paid a courier $20 cash to hand-deliver the envelope directly to Connor's luxury penthouse apartment, requiring his personal signature for receipt. I didn't need to be in the room to know what would happen when he opened it. I knew my son. I knew his temper, his entitlement, and his deep-seated terror of being humiliated. I knew that the moment he read that paper, the unbreakable alliance between father and son would shatter into a million jagged, dangerous pieces. The board was panicking. The executives were turning on each other. The fortress was crumbling from within. It was time for the Queen to step onto the board. The day of the final approval meeting arrived. Global Apex was demanding that the Hayes Trust formally sign off on the acquisition before they transferred a single dollar. Robert, desperate to save the deal and appease the angry proxy shareholders he believed he was dealing with, agreed to a secure, high-stakes video conference. He expected to face a panel of aggressive, suit-wearing Wall Street sharks. He expected to use his charm, his business acumen, and his carefully constructed lies to smooth over their concerns and force the deal through. I arrived at Harrison Cole's office 2 hours early. I had spent the morning not at the bakery, but at a high-end salon on the Upper East Side, paid for by a small advance Harrison had arranged from the trust. My silver hair was no longer a symbol of neglect. It was cut into a sharp, elegant, commanding style. I wore a bespoke, dove gray Armani suit that fit flawlessly. I wore a single string of pearls, the only piece of jewelry my father had ever given me that Robert hadn't managed to confiscate. I looked in the mirror in Harrison's private washroom. I didn't look like Ellie Vance, the exhausted housewife. I looked like Eleanor Hayes. I looked like money. Old, quiet, dangerous money. "They are ready," Harrison said, stepping into the room. He looked at me, a profound respect in his eyes. "The secure link is established. The board of Vance Innovations, Robert, Jessica, and Connor, are all in the primary conference room downtown. Let's not keep my employees waiting," I said smoothly. I walked into Harrison's massive boardroom. The lights were dimmed, focusing on the massive high-definition screen at the end of the table. A heavy leather chair was positioned perfectly in the center of the camera's frame. I sat down, resting my hands calmly on the mahogany table. Harrison stood out of frame, a silent sentinel in the shadows, his hand hovering over the connection switch. "Audio only first," I instructed quietly. "Let them speak to the void." Harrison nodded and tapped the console. The screen flickered to life. The camera in the Vance Innovations boardroom showed a wide shot of absolute tension. Robert sat at the head of the glass table, looking uncharacteristically strained. His tie was perfectly knotted, but he was sweating. To his right sat Jessica, her usual smug composure replaced by a tight, anxious glare. And at the far end of the table sat Connor. He looked terrible. His eyes were dark, his jaw clenched so tight I could see the muscle jumping beneath his skin. He didn't look at his father. He stared a hole into the polished glass table. The anonymous envelope had hit its mark. The poison was working. "Good morning," Robert began, his voice booming with forced, hearty confidence, projecting into the room toward the camera he assumed was connected to a boardroom in the financial district. "On behalf of Vance Innovations, we want to thank the representatives of the Hayes Trust for taking this call. We understand there have been concerns regarding the restructuring and the Global Apex acquisition. I am confident that today we can lay those fears to rest and move forward with what will be the most profitable quarter in this company's history." He paused, waiting for a response from the blank screen. I leaned forward toward the microphone. I didn't disguise my voice. I didn't try to sound like a Wall Street banker. I spoke in the calm, measured, maternal tone I had used for 40 years to tell him his dinner was ready. "Profitable for whom, Robert?" The effect was instantaneous and violently physical. Robert froze. The color drained from his face so fast he looked as though he had been struck by lightning. His mouth fell open, but no sound came out. Jessica's head snapped up, her eyes widening in pure shock, scanning the blank screen as if she could pull the voice out of the pixels. Connor physically flinched, gripping the edges of the table, his head whipping toward the camera lens. Who is this?" Robert stammered, the smooth CEO completely vanishing, replaced by a man suddenly drowning in deep water. "What is this? This is a secure line for the Hayes Trust." "Turn on the video, Harrison," I said softly. The screen blinked. The black void vanished, replaced by my face, broadcast in high definition onto the massive screen in their boardroom. I sat back in my leather chair, perfectly composed, wearing the Armani suit, the pearls, and a look of absolute glacial authority. The silence in the Vance boardroom was absolute. It was the kind of silence that follows a bomb detonation before the ringing in your ears begins. Robert stood up slowly, his hands trembling so violently he had to press them flat against the glass table to stay upright. "Ellie?" he whispered, the name tearing out of his throat like a dry sob. "Eleanor? How did you hack into this feed? This is a federal offense." Jessica was hyperventilating, her perfectly manicured hands flying to her mouth. "Security!" she shrieked, her voice shrill and panicked. "Someone call security, she's breached the network." I didn't raise my voice. I didn't have to. "No one is hacking anything, Jessica," I said, my voice cutting through her panic like a scalpel. "And I strongly advise against calling security to remove the majority shareholder from her own meeting." Robert stared at the screen, his mind violently rejecting the reality before him. "Majority shareholder? You're insane. You're a bitter, delusional old woman living in a slum. The Hayes Trust is..." He stopped. The words hung in the air. The Hayes Trust. I watched the exact millisecond his brain connected the name of the Wall Street proxy he had feared for 30 years with the maiden name of the woman he had discarded like trash. Thomas Hayes. Eleanor Hayes Vance. His knees buckled slightly. He fell heavily back into his chair, all the air rushing out of his lungs. "Hello, Robert," I said, a slow, terrifying smile spreading across my face. "You wanted to speak to the owner of Vance Innovations to ask permission to sell my company. You have the floor. Impress me." For 10 agonizing seconds, the only sound echoing through the high-definition speakers was the low, steady hum of the boardroom's air conditioning. I sat perfectly still in my leather chair, watching the feed as the reality of my words slowly detonated inside Robert's brain. His mouth opened and closed, completely devoid of the sharp, charismatic rhetoric that had made him a titan of industry. He looked like a man who had just stepped off a curb and realized a freight train was inches from his face. Jessica was the first to recover her voice. Her survival instinct was admittedly formidable. "This is a fabrication," she snapped, her voice shrill, a stark contrast to her usual practiced purr. She leaned toward the microphone, her eyes manic. "This is a deepfake, or a highly illegal cyber intrusion. The Hayes Trust is a managed syndicate. Robert, don't listen to this. We are tracing this IP address immediately." I didn't blink. "Jessica, I can assure you that my wrinkles are entirely authentic, as is the 51% preferred voting power that currently holds your severance package in a chokehold. I shifted my gaze back to the center of the screen, locking eyes with my ex-husband. I gave you 30 years, Robert. You used my father's genius to build an empire, and when you decided you wanted a younger queen, you tried to bury me in the foundation. But you made a fatal miscalculation. You forgot whose name is on the deed to the land. Ellie, please, Robert choked out, his hands gripping the edge of the glass table so tightly his knuckles were bone white. The arrogance was completely gone, replaced by a raw, naked panic. You don't understand business. You don't understand what this merger means. If you blow up the Global Apex deal, the stock will plummet. You'll destroy the company. You'll destroy your own wealth. I don't care about the wealth, I stated, my voice as cold and clear as winter ice. I survived perfectly fine on $32 a week and the smell of yeast at 4 in the morning. I am comfortable in the ashes, Robert. Are you? Before he could stammer out another desperate plea, I delivered the killing blow to his afternoon. As the sole beneficiary and active director of the Hayes Trust, I am officially issuing a shareholder injunction. The Global Apex acquisition is suspended indefinitely, pending a full forensic audit of the executive accounts. Furthermore, Jessica Sterling is hereby barred from the premises of Vance Innovations, effective immediately. If she is not out of the building in 20 minutes, I will have the proxy board contact the authorities for corporate trespassing. You can't do that, Jessica shrieked, slamming her hands on the table. Watch me, I whispered. I reached out and pressed the button on the console. The screen went black. In the sudden silence of Harrison Cole's office, I slowly exhaled a breath I felt like I had been holding for 6 months. My hands were trembling slightly, not from fear, but from the massive surge of adrenaline. I had done it. I had looked the monster in the eye and ripped its fangs out. Harrison walked over to a side table and poured 2 fingers of amber liquid into a crystal glass. He handed it to me. Drink, he commanded gently. You've earned it. I took a sip, the bourbon burning a clean, fiery path down my throat. What will they do now? A cornered beast is the most dangerous kind, Eleanor, Harrison warned, his blue eyes serious. Robert's ego has just been publicly slaughtered in front of his son and his mistress. He will not surrender. And Jessica is a corner-cutting corporate bulldog. They will look for a weakness. They will try to find a way around your authority. There is no way around the trust, I said confidently. Legally, no, Harrison agreed. But practically, there is one avenue. It is a desperate, filthy tactic, but given what is at stake, I would bet my career Jessica is already drafting the paperwork. I frowned, setting the glass down. What tactic? Incompetence, Harrison said quietly. You are a 62-year-old woman. After a supposedly devastating divorce, you moved into a low-income apartment and took up manual labor in a bakery. Now you have suddenly emerged, claiming control of a multi-million-dollar corporation, acting, in their narrative, erratic, vengeful, and delusional. Jessica will try to petition a judge for an emergency medical conservatorship. They will claim the trauma of the divorce triggered early-onset dementia or a psychotic break. If a judge grants Robert or Connor emergency medical proxy over you, they can freeze your ability to operate the trust. A sickening chill washed over me. It was so perfectly evil, so utterly devoid of humanity, that I knew instantly Harrison was right. They would try to institutionalize me to steal my company. They need proof for that, I said, my voice tight. A doctor's evaluation. Witnesses. They don't need a doctor to file the initial emergency injunction, Harrison explained. They just need sworn affidavits from your immediate family detailing your deteriorating mental state. Robert will sign one, but a judge will want corroboration. Connor, I whispered. The name felt like ash on my tongue. Yes, they will need your son to testify that his mother is losing her mind. 2 nights later, the heavy skies over New York opened up in a torrential, freezing downpour. I was sitting in my dark apartment, the glow of my laptop illuminating the endless spreadsheets of Vance Innovations' offshore accounts. At 11:30 p.m., there was a heavy, hesitant knock on my door. I didn't ask who it was. I walked to the door, unlocked the 3 deadbolts I had installed, and pulled it open. Connor stood in the dimly lit hallway. He was completely soaked, his expensive wool topcoat plastered to his shoulders, rain dripping from his hair. He looked hollowed out. The arrogant, untouchable golden boy I had seen on the video feed was gone. In his place was a 32-year-old man who looked like he had not slept since the boardroom screen went black. In his trembling hand, he held the unmarked manila envelope I had couriered to him, the one containing the proof that his father and Jessica were planning to fire him the moment the company was sold. "Is this real?" His voice cracked. It was a pathetic, broken sound. I stood in the doorway, blocking his entrance. I didn't reach out to hug him. I didn't rush to get him a towel. The mother who would have coddled him had been systematically dismantled by his own actions. "You're the chief operating officer, Connor," I said coldly. "You know a legally binding contract when you see one. Clause B. They were going to hand you a severance check and change the locks." A sob tore out of his throat. He leaned his forehead against the doorframe, his shoulders shaking. "He promised me, Mom. He told me that if I just signed those transfer papers during the divorce, if I just helped him protect the cash flow, the company would be mine someday. He said you wouldn't understand. He said it was just business." "And you believed him," I said, my voice stripped of all emotion. "Because it was easier to believe I was a burden than to admit your father was a thief. You signed away my food, Connor. You signed away the roof over my head. You watched me walk out of that house with one suitcase, knowing full well there were millions sitting in offshore accounts with your signature on them." "I'm sorry," he wept, sliding down the doorframe until he was sitting on the wet floor of the hallway, a broken, shivering mess. "I'm so sorry, Mom. You have to believe me. I didn't know how bad it was. I didn't know you were working in a bakery. I couldn't look at you. I was so ashamed." I looked down at this boy I had raised. The agony in my chest was immense, a physical weight that threatened to crack my ribs. I wanted to forgive him. Every maternal instinct I possessed screamed at me to pull him off the floor and tell him everything would be all right. But if I did that, he would never learn. He would remain Robert's pawn forever. Sometimes true love requires a scalpel, not a bandage. "Get up," I commanded, stepping back to let him into the tiny, freezing living room. He stumbled inside, looking around at the peeling wallpaper and the thrift store furniture with wide, horrified eyes. "Why are you here, Connor?" I asked, crossing my arms. "You didn't walk through a rainstorm at midnight just to apologize. What did Robert send you to do?" Connor froze. He looked down at his wet shoes, a fresh wave of shame washing over his pale face. Slowly, he reached inside his ruined coat and pulled out a thick stack of legal papers, sealed in a plastic folder to protect them from the rain. He placed them on my kitchen table. "Jessica drafted it this morning," Connor whispered, his voice trembling with self-disgust. "It's an emergency petition for medical conservatorship. They want me to sign a sworn affidavit saying that you've been calling me in the middle of the night, speaking to people who aren't there. That you believe you're a billionaire because of a psychotic break brought on by the trauma of the divorce. If I sign it, a judge will freeze the Hayes Trust by tomorrow afternoon, pending a psychiatric evaluation." I stared at the papers. Harrison had been exactly right. The cruelty of it was breathtaking. They weren't just trying to steal my company. They were trying to steal my sanity, my dignity, and my freedom. "And?" I asked, my gaze locking onto my son's tear-streaked face. "Are you going to sign it?" Connor looked at me, a desperate, pleading look in his eyes. "Mom, if I don't sign it, Dad said he'll destroy me. He said he'll pin the offshore transfers on me. My signature is on those authorizations. He said he'll tell the FBI I acted alone. I'll go to federal prison." He was caught in a trap of his own making. Robert was using the very crimes he forced Connor to commit as a leash to strangle him. "What do I do, Mom?" he begged, looking like a terrified little boy. "Please, tell me what to do." I walked over to the table. I picked up the plastic folder, pulled out the affidavit, and grabbed a pen from the counter. I held it out to him. "Sign it," I said. Connor stared at me, uncomprehending. "What? No, Mom. If I sign this, they'll lock you in a facility. They'll take everything." "Sign it, Connor," I repeated, my voice leaving absolutely no room for argument. "Take this back to your father. Tell him I screamed at you, threw things, and acted completely deranged. Tell him the crazy ex-wife narrative is perfect. Let them file it with the court." "Why?" he gasped. I leaned in, my eyes burning with a cold, strategic fire. "Because perjury is a felony, and when you submit a fraudulent affidavit to a federal judge in an attempt to seize a multi-million-dollar trust, It is a guaranteed prison sentence. I want Jessica Sterling to walk into a courtroom with a fake document. I want them to commit to the lie on the public record. But they'll use it to push the Global Apex deal through, Connor argued. Dad is frantic. He told Jessica that if they can just get the conservatorship granted for 48 hours, he can sign the final acquisition papers with Global Apex. Once the company is sold, he'll have hundreds of millions in liquid cash to fight you in court forever. I smiled. It wasn't a nice smile. Let him. I handed Connor the pen. His hand was shaking violently as he took it. He signed his name at the bottom of the affidavit, a signature that sealed his mother's supposed insanity, but in reality was the final nail in Robert Vance's coffin. Go home, Connor, I said softly. Give that to your father. Play the dutiful son one last time. And then, pack a bag. When the dust settles, you're going to need a very good lawyer. The next 48 hours were a masterclass in corporate desperation. Armed with Connor's signed affidavit, Jessica Sterling moved with lethal speed. She filed the emergency petition under seal in a friendly judge's chamber, citing an immediate threat to the financial stability of Vance Innovations due to the mental incapacitation of its majority shareholder. The judge, swayed by Robert's towering reputation and the slick, urgent legal maneuvering of his general counsel, granted a temporary 72-hour freeze on the Hayes Trust's voting power. It was a Tuesday morning when the news broke internally. I was sitting in Harrison Cole's office, watching the encrypted emails fly across the network. Robert believed he had won. He believed he had successfully muzzled the ghost of Thomas Hayes. With the trust temporarily paralyzed, Robert immediately contacted the executives at Global Apex. He was desperate to finalize the sale before I could hire a legal team to contest the conservatorship. He needed the cash. He needed the escape hatch. He's taking the bait, Eleanor, Harrison murmured, watching his secure monitor. Robert just emailed the lead acquisition officer at Global Apex. He is begging to close the deal by 5 p.m. today. Did he send the shadow books? I asked, my pulse quickening. In a standard merger, a company only reveals its sanitized, legally compliant ledgers. But Global Apex had been playing hardball, demanding proof of Vance Innovations' true liquidity before they agreed to the massive purchase price. They demanded to see the offshore accounts, the hidden money, the proof of the fraud. We will know in exactly 10 seconds, Harrison said, his fingers flying across the keyboard. The silence in the office was thick with anticipation. We were waiting for Robert Vance to voluntarily hand over his own murder weapon. If he was arrogant enough, if he was desperate enough to believe his new corporate partners would protect him. A soft ping echoed from Harrison's computer. A heavily encrypted, password-protected file had just arrived in the secure inbox. Harrison typed in the decryption key. A loading bar flashed across the screen. When the file opened, hundreds of pages of raw, unredacted financial data spilled across the monitors. It was the Holy Grail. Bank statements from the Cayman Islands. Wire transfers authorized by Jessica Sterling. Invoices from fake shell companies used to drain the company's domestic accounts prior to my divorce. It was a complete, undeniably signed confession of grand larceny, tax evasion, and corporate fraud, meticulously documented by Robert himself to prove his company's illicit worth. Harrison let out a low whistle. He did it. He actually sent the unredacted files. He thinks Global Apex will look the other way because it proves the company is highly profitable. Print every single page, I ordered, standing up, smoothing the front of my blazer. The adrenaline was entirely gone, replaced by a profound, terrifying calm. Make 3 copies. One for us, one for the SEC, and one for the FBI. Harrison looked up at me, a smile crinkling the corners of his eyes. Should I reply to his email, Mrs. Vance, to confirm receipt? No, I said, walking toward the heavy oak doors of the office. I think the CEO of Global Apex should deliver the confirmation in person. Robert Vance had spent the last month desperately trying to impress a phantom. He had groveled to a faceless conglomerate, offering them his company, his secrets, and his crimes, believing they were his salvation. What he didn't know, what nobody knew except Harrison and myself, was that there was no board of directors at Global Apex. There was no massive Wall Street syndicate. Global Apex was a shell corporation, a ghost entity established 6 months ago in Delaware by Harrison Cole. And its sole owner, president and acting CEO, was a 62-year-old woman who had spent the winter baking bread in the dark. It was time to go back to the office. It was time to burn his empire to the ground. The executive boardroom of Vance Innovations occupied the entire top floor of the glass tower. It was a monument to Robert's ego, featuring panoramic views of the Manhattan skyline, a table carved from a single slab of imported marble, and chairs that cost more than my first car. At 3 p.m. on Tuesday, the room was suffocatingly tense. The entire board of directors had been summoned for an emergency vote. Robert stood at the head of the table, his bespoke suit immaculate, his silver hair perfectly styled. The panic of the video conference 2 days prior was entirely gone. He looked like a conqueror who had just successfully crushed a peasant rebellion. To his right sat Jessica Sterling, her posture rigidly triumphant. She had a thick, sealed legal folder resting on the table in front of her. To his left sat Connor, staring blankly at the polished marble, his face the color of wet ash. "Ladies and gentlemen of the board," Robert began, his voice projecting the deep, resonant authority that had fooled Wall Street for 3 decades. "I apologize for the sudden nature of this meeting. However, we are facing an unprecedented crisis that threatens the very survival of Vance Innovations and the pending Global Apex acquisition." He paused, letting the gravity of his words sink in. The board members, a collection of older, wealthy men and women who preferred quiet profits over corporate drama, murmured uneasily. "As you are aware, the Hayes Trust holds significant voting power in this company," Robert continued, adopting an expression of profound theatrical sadness. "What you do not know is that the sole beneficiary of that trust is my ex-wife, Eleanor." A ripple of genuine shock went through the room. Robert held up a hand to quiet them. Tragically, the dissolution of our marriage took a severe toll on Eleanor's mental health. She has suffered a profound psychological break. She has been living in squalor, making erratic demands, and attempting to sabotage the livelihood of thousands of employees out of pure delusional vindictiveness. Robert nodded solemnly to Jessica. She stood up, smoothing her skirt, and placed her hand on the legal folder. "This morning," Jessica announced, her voice ringing with practiced legal authority, "a federal judge reviewed sworn affidavits detailing Mrs. Vance's deteriorating mental state, including a heartbreaking testimony from her own son, our COO. The judge has granted an emergency medical conservatorship. The Hayes Trust is officially frozen. Eleanor Vance no longer has the legal capacity to interfere with this company." Robert offered a brave, weary smile. "It is a family tragedy, but my duty is to this company. With the trust neutralized, I am asking the board for an immediate vote to authorize my signature on the Global Apex acquisition. We close the deal today at 5 o'clock. Several board members nodded sympathetically. The crisis was averted. The millions were safe. "All those in favor?" Robert asked, raising his hand. Slowly, hands around the table began to rise. Jessica's lips curled into a sharp, victorious smirk. Connor closed his eyes, a single tear escaping down his cheek. Before the final hand could go up, the heavy mahogany doors of the boardroom swung open with a resounding crack. Every head in the room snapped toward the entrance. I walked in. I wasn't wearing the frantic, unhinged expression of a madwoman. I was wearing a tailored charcoal suit, my posture perfectly straight, my heels clicking a slow, rhythmic death march against the hardwood floor. Harrison Cole flanked me on my right, carrying a heavy leather briefcase. "Put your hands down, gentlemen," I said, my voice cutting through the stunned silence like a diamond blade. "There will be no vote today." Robert's face instantly flushed with rage. He slammed his hand onto the table. "Security! I want her removed immediately. She is medically incapacitated and trespassing." "Sit down, Robert," Harrison Cole boomed, his voice echoing with decades of courtroom dominance. "You have no authority here, Harrison," Jessica shrieked, pointing a manicured finger at me. "The conservatorship is signed. A judge has frozen the Hayes Trust. She is legally powerless." I didn't stop walking until I reached the opposite end of the long marble table, directly facing Robert. I placed my hands on the cool stone, leaning forward slightly. "You are absolutely right, Jessica," I said calmly. "The Hayes Trust is temporarily frozen. I cannot use my voting shares to stop the acquisition, which is why I am not here as the representative of the Hayes Trust." Robert froze. His eyes darted between me and Harrison, a flicker of raw uncertainty piercing his arrogant armor. "Then what the hell are you doing here?" I smiled. It was the same cold, terrifying smile I had given him through the screen 2 days ago. "I am here as the Chief Executive Officer of Global Apex," I said softly. The silence that followed was absolute. It was the sound of a vacuum, of all the oxygen being instantly sucked out of the room. Robert's mouth opened, but no sound came out. He stared at me, his brain violently misfiring as it tried to process an impossible reality. Global apex? He finally choked out, the color rapidly draining from his face. That's impossible. Global Apex is a multinational conglomerate. I've spoken to their representatives. You spoke to actors hired by Harrison's law firm, I corrected smoothly. Global Apex is a Delaware shell corporation. It was incorporated 6 months ago for one singular purpose: to see how much of my father's company you were willing to steal to save yourself. Jessica stumbled backward, her high heel catching on the thick carpet. She grabbed the back of her chair to keep from falling. No. We sent the financials. We sent the ledgers to Global Apex this morning. Yes, you did, I said, my voice hardening into steel. Harrison stepped forward. He opened his heavy leather briefcase and pulled out 3 massive bound stacks of paper. He dropped them onto the center of the marble table with a thunderous thud. Unredacted offshore account statements, Harrison announced to the horrified board of directors. Wire transfers to dummy corporations in the Cayman Islands. Fabricated invoices used to drain domestic cash reserves during a falsified bankruptcy. All authorized by Robert Vance and legally cleared by Jessica Sterling. The board erupted into chaos. Men and women were shouting, standing up, reaching for the documents. Robert stumbled back from the table, looking at the towering stacks of his own meticulously documented crimes. He looked like a man watching his own execution. You set me up, Robert whispered, staring at me with wide, bloodshot eyes. You built a fake company to trick me into giving you the shadow books. I didn't trick you, Robert, I said, my voice echoing over the shouting board members. I offered you a rope and you eagerly tied the noose around your own neck. This is illegal, Jessica screamed, her voice cracking into a hysterical pitch. This is entrapment. Those documents were obtained under false pretenses. They are inadmissible in court. That, a new voice interrupted, is for a federal judge to decide. The boardroom doors opened again. The chaos in the room instantly died. 4 men and 2 women in dark windbreakers with the bright yellow letters FBI printed across the back walked into the room. Behind them were 3 agents from the Securities and Exchange Commission. Robert Vance and Jessica Sterling, the lead FBI agent said, pulling a pair of steel handcuffs from his belt. His voice was bored, practiced, and entirely devoid of sympathy. You are under arrest for federal wire fraud, corporate embezzlement, tax evasion, and perjury. Robert collapsed into his chair. He put his face in his hands, a pathetic, broken sound escaping his throat. The king was dead. The empire had fallen. But Jessica Sterling was not a woman who went down with the ship. As the FBI agents approached with the handcuffs, her survival instinct violently kicked in. She threw her hands up, backing away from Robert as if he were suddenly radioactive. Wait, she cried out, looking directly at the lead agent. I want immunity. I will testify. I was just following orders. Robert Vance forced me to sign those documents. He threatened to fire me if I didn't set up the offshore accounts. I am a victim of a hostile corporate environment. I have evidence he was the sole mastermind. Robert snapped his head up, staring at the woman he had abandoned his 40-year marriage for. You lying bitch, he breathed, pure hatred contorting his features. You came up with the Cayman structure. You drafted the fake bankruptcy. Prove it, Jessica spat back, her eyes wild, her flawless hair falling out of its perfect bob. My signature is only on the compliance forms. You authorize the transfers. I am cooperating with the federal government. She looked at me, a desperate, feral sneer on her face. You think you won, Eleanor? I'll walk away from this with a slap on the wrist. I'll be back practicing law in a year. I looked at the young, ruthless woman who had worn my husband's ring and tried to lock me in an asylum. I felt no anger. I only felt pity. You really should have paid more attention to the people you stepped on, Jessica, I said softly. I reached into the pocket of my blazer and pulled out my smartphone. I tapped the screen, turning the volume all the way up, and pressed play. The audio was incredibly clear. It echoed through the dead-silent boardroom. Jessica's voice. Robert is getting soft. He's nervous about the SEC. If we don't move the last $50 million to the Caymans before the Global Apex audit, the whole structure collapses. Another voice, Connor's voice, shaky and terrified. I can't authorize another transfer, Jessica. It's too much. If they trace my signature, Jessica's voice cold and venomous. You will sign it, Connor, or I will personally make sure the compliance audit falls entirely on your desk. I built this back door, and I will shut it on your fingers if you don't do exactly what I tell you. Robert doesn't have the stomach for the legal risk. I do. Now sign the damn paper. The recording clicked off. Jessica Sterling turned the color of chalk. The arrogant fire in her eyes instantly extinguished, replaced by the hollow, vacant stare of a trapped animal, realizing the cage door just locked permanently. I looked over at Connor. He was still sitting at the table. He hadn't moved. The night he came to my apartment, sobbing in the rain, he hadn't just brought the fraudulent conservatorship papers. He had brought the insurance policy he had secretly recorded on his phone months ago, terrified of the woman his father was sleeping with. I believe the SEC will find that recording very illuminating regarding your claim of being a victim, Ms. Sterling, I said. The FBI agent grabbed Jessica's wrist, snapping the cold steel around it. She didn't fight. She didn't scream. She simply stared at the floor, completely broken. They hauled Robert up by his arms. They handcuffed him behind his back. As they led him toward the door, he stopped. He looked at me, standing at the head of the table in my tailored suit, holding the keys to the kingdom he had spent his life building. 40 years, Ellie, he whispered, a tear finally breaking loose and tracing a line down his pale face. We built this together. No, Robert, I replied, my voice steady, my eyes completely dry. My father built it. You just painted the walls, and I am tired of your taste in decor. They let him out. The heavy mahogany doors closed behind him. The boardroom was terrifyingly quiet. The remaining board members sat in stunned silence, looking at me as if I had just descended from the sky. I slowly walked over to Robert's empty chair at the head of the marble table. I didn't sit in it. I simply placed my hands on the leather backrest. The Hayes Trust conservatorship will be formally dissolved by tomorrow morning, given the fraudulent nature of the affidavit. I addressed the room. Vance Innovations is not for sale, not to Global Apex and not to anyone else. Tomorrow we begin a full internal restructuring. We are going to clean the rot out of the basement, and we are going to get back to what my father actually cared about, building things that matter. The board members nodded frantically, eager to align themselves with the new apex predator in the room. As the room cleared out, only one person remained. Connor. He sat alone at the massive table, his head in his hands. He was waiting for his sentence. He had recorded Jessica, yes, but he had still signed the papers that starved his mother. He had still chosen power over blood until the power turned on him. I walked over to him. I stood beside his chair. Mom, he choked out, not daring to look up at me. I know I'm fired. I'll clear out my desk. You are fired from the position of Chief Operating Officer, I said quietly. He nodded, a sob hitching in his chest. However, I continued, my tone shifting into a sharp, uncompromising cadence. The logistics department in the basement currently has a vacancy for a junior inventory clerk. The pay is $42,000 a year. The hours are brutal. You will clock in at 6 in the morning, and you will learn how this company actually operates from the ground up without the protection of your father's name. Connor slowly looked up at me, his eyes red and swollen, disbelief washing over his face. You're not sending me to prison? I am your mother, Connor, I said, my voice softening just a fraction, allowing a sliver of the old Ellie to bleed through the armor. I will not destroy you, but I will not enable you either. You want to be a man of value? Prove it. In the basement. He stood up. For the first time in years, he looked like the little boy I had raised, stripped of his expensive suits and unearned arrogance. He threw his arms around my shoulders, burying his face in my neck, crying like a child. I hugged him back, resting my chin on his shoulder. It wasn't a perfect reconciliation. The trust was severely broken, but it was a start. 6 months later, the autumn wind off the Hudson River was crisp, carrying the scent of fallen leaves and cold water. I stood on the massive wraparound balcony of my new penthouse apartment overlooking Central Park. I held a glass of expensive red wine in one hand, the crystal catching the light of the setting sun. My smartphone buzzed in the pocket of my cashmere cardigan. I pulled it out. It was a notification from the bank. The quarterly dividends from the Hayes Trust had just cleared. The number on the screen had more commas than most people see in a lifetime. I didn't smile at the money. I didn't care about the number. Robert Vance was currently sitting in a federal penitentiary in upstate New York, serving a 10-year sentence for wire fraud. Jessica Sterling was in a minimum security facility in Connecticut, her legal license permanently revoked. Connor was exhausted, working 50-hour weeks in the logistics department. But for the first time in his adult life, he looked genuinely proud of himself. I took a sip of the wine. It tasted like freedom. I had been told my whole life that a woman's power faded with her youth, that by the time my hair turned silver, my only role was to be quiet, to be accommodating, and to fade gracefully into the background. Robert believed that lie. He banked his entire life on it. I looked out over the glittering skyline of the city, watching the millions of lights blink on as the darkness settled in. I raised my glass to the empty air, a silent toast to the quiet mechanic in a dusty garage who had given his daughter the ultimate weapon. They say hell hath no fury like a woman scorned, but fury is loud, messy, and burns itself out. If you truly want to destroy the men who try to erase you, don't use fury, use patience. Because the most dangerous piece on the board is never the king. It's the queen who finally remembers how to move.